here, do a hard transition over to baseball. Just looking at this past weekend, David Ortiz was elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Came with a little bit of controversy, given that names like Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, Roger Clemens, Rafael Palmeiro to a lesser extent. They're still waiting for their Hall call, whether it'll come or not. How did you feel about David Ortiz being elected? There is some history there with PED usage. Whether or not it's as severe as a Sosa, Bonds case, Clemens case is to be debated. But what did you think?
Yeah, I think part of it just has to do how likable David Ortiz is. I feel like he played the game well with regards to that, like being able to schmooze with the right people. The press has been pretty favorable overall with David Ortiz. So, it's one of those, like, he's just so likable. So how can he hate on him? Whereas you look at players like Alex Rodriguez, Curt Schilling, and like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, like a lot of them, they had a lot more successful careers. Definitely were a lot more involved with regards to the steroids and that era and kind of what everything meant more so. Like, it was much more like that they were symbols of this, whereas David Ortiz like really wasn't. And there's definitely been, I guess, some subjectivity with regards to the how it was tested, because it was tested, I think, like 2003, 2004, and it was kind of like this, just to see who actually is doing steroids, but not actually identifying them. So it was kind of like not as informal of a steroid or performance enhancing drug test per se. So that's actually where I think Manfred was like, hey, let's give it with a grain of salt. Like, this actually wasn't as formulated as what we do today, right? In terms of today's testing. So I definitely think he has a lot of people on his side. So I think that certainly helps. He definitely has played the political game very much good with a lot of the overwhelmingly with baseball writers. First ballot Hall of Famer. Like, if you were to say that as David Ortiz as a DH, maybe 5 years ago, that this guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer, I would probably say no, actually. Really good stats, definitely, I think when he was 27, or basically when he joined the Red Sox. So, very admirable with that. Like, love him in the playoffs. But, with regards to DH and everything, like, there was that whole history behind should DHs be, in the Hall of Fame. But, you compare him to someone like Frank Thomas. Frank Thomas had better advanced metrics. I think David Ortiz's WAR is 55 or something like that, or maybe 53. So kind of not, I think the cutoff kind of is in the 70s or 60s. So 50s is very much on the really, really good, but not necessarily, Hall of Famer level, at least definitely in the more modern day MLB. So it definitely has to go, I think, maybe 60% towards him just being favorable with the media, knowing the right people to kind of mitigate his whole steroid use scandals, and kind of going from there. But you can't knock him, though, for his clutchness, and he was a 10-time All-Star. So with the Boston faithful kind of voting him in and taking care of him there. So, but at the same time, I'm like, Curt Schilling then needs to be in the Hall of Fame if that's the case. I know he's a little bit of a douchebag and everything there, but this is the Baseball Hall of Fame, not the most likable, most Mr. Congeniality or whatever. This is baseball, and it's hard to compete against Curt Schilling's resume, especially in the later half of his career, when he was just winning games, being clutch, and he finished, I think, second in the Cy Young 3 times. It's like Randy Johnson. So, he definitely showed up there and was a difference maker overall. So, I think those are my initial thoughts there. But yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on Ortiz. Did he deserve it? First ballot Hall of Famer, or just this whole do people that have steroid and PED positive testing, do they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I loved your opening there. I think there's a ton of good points. First on the PED usage, in 2003, he found his way onto a report. It was questionable even at that time with Manny Ramirez was also on that, but essentially, I think Manfred, like you were saying, like there's 10 different areas where there was scientific questioning of the actual results of the test. And then I think at that time they required 2 tests and they both had to be positives for the PED, suspension or to be kind of like claimed as a PED user or something like that. So I think that only occurred on one of his tests and, they never got to a second or they never proved anything on a second test too. So it's kind of like that to me is a little bit inconclusive, but, even if that was the case, the majority of his numbers, if you look at his actual stat line, comes 2004 and after. So after he was caught in that, that report or, some of that suspicion, all of his damage was done after that fact. Whereas, we look at a Bonds, we look at a Sosa, some of these other, Palmeiro, some of these notorious types, it's like, well, they did all their damage while using the product and doing it, pretty obviously. There was, paper records from Balco. They got onto the Mitchell report. They'd been using it over prolonged periods of time, years and years, for that matter. So when I think of what Ortiz, did, at least on the PED side, I don't know if it's as severe as others. And, it almost seems like it's still kind of in question. So without that kind of like tangible, bulletproof type, case around it, it's hard for me to say like, okay, here's what he did, and this is why, morally or ethically he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. Now, based on a numbers perspective, like 500 home runs has always been like that benchmark, number. I think even more so today, 500 home runs is going to be, extra commendable because, guys just aren't hitting. They're not doing 50 home run seasons as much, 60 home run seasons. Like we may see Aaron Judge, approach 60 this year, which would be awesome, but just generally speaking, that number will probably have more prominence over, the next 20 to 30 years or so with this next crop of guys. But, he had 540 home runs, 7-time Silver Slugger, you name the all-star accolades. What he did in the playoffs was so impressive. I mean, he was just ice cold, veins, going up there in the series where they were down 3-0 in the ALCS, the Yankees. I mean, seriously, I've never watched a better playoff series of baseball my entire life. I mean, I was absolutely glued to the TV that whole fall. I was probably, at that point, maybe a junior in high school or something. So, baseball was my world, but, just kind of see him hit the walk-off. I feel like that was maybe game 5 or so. And then, tack on 2 more World Series after that first one for the Red Sox. I mean, he's had just a great career. He's just such a character. I mean, even now he's still on Fox and he's like pulling pranks with Frank Thomas and Dontrell Willis. Like you're saying, he's just a very lovable type guy. And, needless to say for Boston, he was, iconic next to Manny Ramirez too. Johnny Damon, all those other characters or whatnot. But, I think his numbers play, whether or not he's at the Frank Thomas, level for a DH, I don't think he's there. Is he more, maybe a stronger version of, Edgar Martinez or something of the sort. But, I'm totally with you. I think guys like Curt Schilling, if we're just going to get down to like, talking about the Hall of Fame, who belongs, who doesn't. I mean, I feel bad for Curt Schilling, even though I know he's like very outspoken and he like really toes, political lines and, he's probably not everybody's favorite person, but, just in general, I mean, you think back to like World Series baseball, and I can't think of a pitcher that like comes to mind as much as Curt Schilling. Like our whole childhood, it was like the Diamondbacks, the Red Sox. I mean, that guy, he was even with the Phillies in '93. I mean, like he just always, found a way during that time of year to be, just lights out. And, his numbers play too. I think he's got more than 200 wins. He's, definitely been a league leader in strikeouts multiple seasons throughout his career. Probably a solid career ERA. I don't have the stat line in front of me for Curt Schilling, but he's one of those guys where I think, it's kind of obvious. It's just, kind of unfortunate that personalities get in the way of things. But no, as far as my case, I've always kind of stood with it and I'll always stand behind it. But like, I know Barry Bonds would have been a Hall of Famer, whether or not he did steroids or not. And I know Roger Clemens would have been a Hall of Famer, regardless of steroid usage. Sammy Sosa, I don't think so. Other guys who are kind of in the discussion but have been left out, like we can probably debate them, more thoroughly. But, it just comes down to principle. Like everybody, I feel like there's been arguments for, okay, baseballs should just acknowledge that the steroid era existed. It should be, commemorated. It's like this thing, like we have acknowledged it, we have recognized it, but there's no reason to like celebrate the actors involved in this whole racket, in this whole scheme, because, as great as they were for that era, they also took away from the greatness of other guys in that league. And that's like, I think you and I have talked about this, like Astros thing is where it's like, yeah, the Astros players like all cheated. They didn't just cheat, but they seriously took paychecks away from guys because, they'd blow up certain pitchers and, baby pitchers were sent back to the minors and didn't get a real chance to, live out their baseball MLB experience authentically and in a non-illegal way. So, yeah, I just don't think that, we can all acknowledge it. We can all say like, Bonds and Clemens and all these guys were great for this era, but like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like you cheated, you did a wrong thing. Like you're not going to get into, the most, like renowned, museum for, people of this craft. But that's just my perspective.
Yeah, no, those are great thoughts. I'll touch base first on Curt Schilling, and then I can speak more, I guess, with regards to steroid use and all that. So I'm looking at the metrics for Curt Schilling. His WAR for his career is 79.5, which is pretty damn good for a pitcher. And with regards to his ERA, yeah, he had 216 wins, ERA 3.46, which, for his era is pretty damn good. And, also playing at Fenway Park, especially later in his career, very much a hitter's park there. So very commendable there. His stats are just ungodly. Like, I don't know if anybody can look at the stats, of today and compare it to the stats that he has or that he had. He was the Phillies, Arizona, and all that. Like 256 innings pitched, like astronomical, and then barely any walks too. I think that was his whole thing was he would do all these things, like be an innings eater, but then also have like a whip under like 1.2, right, or like under 1. It's like, how do you do that? How do you get 300 strikeouts? And then, get like 30 walks at the same time or whatever, 40 walks, and then 250 plus innings. Like, this is just nuts, especially in today's type of baseball. So, yeah, I don't care necessarily like, he didn't cheat, right? He kind of played it as clean as possible. He's definitely not the most fit person, so you can definitely like, all right, he's not. You always kind of have a little bit of a beer belly going on there and all, but hey, he can throw 98, especially in the later in his career. So, I think Schilling deserves it to be in the Hall of Fame. I think he ought to have been a first ballot, and I think it's. Just a disturb. It really just goes to show like the Oscars and the Emmys and all that and the Hall of Fame. It's all political. It's all a contest of not just of your accolades or how good you are, but of how well you can play the game of politics, schmoozing up to the people, playing to whatever the zeitgeist of that moment is happening. So. I definitely think it's honestly just wrong that he is not in the Hall of Fame. So
one interjection I had with what you're saying is I back you in putting Schilling in. Is Jack Morris, I feel like, is a guy who's pretty comparable to him that was kind of held out of the Hall of Fame, not for personal reasons, but just on numbers alone. And I'm pretty sure Schilling's probably got him matched or beaten a lot of these areas, but like, so Jack Morris had 254 wins, a 390 career ERA, and he was a 3-time World Series winner like Schilling, and he waited a while to get in, even though he was pretty squeaky clean. But even his WAR was 43.5. And like you're saying with Schilling, it's like you just said, like he's like at Frank Thomas level WAR is what you were saying, like 73, something like that, something plus. But it's just that's what it's showing me. It's like, I mean, that's pretty. He's almost like double the player of Jack Morris, who was a good pitcher first time.
Yeah, and this is where I'm like, you know, with regards to people, sometimes we just get, I don't want to say like our feelings hurt, and we just go with regards to how we feel about things sometimes without actually looking at the stats, without trying to be as objective as possible about things. Like, I lost all respect for the Oscars when they picked Saving Private Ryan not to win, and they picked or should I say they picked was it Shakespeare in Love to win over Saving Private Ryan. After that, I'm like, y'all don't know what you're talking about. You guys are just a bunch of, you know, hippies in the West Coast or whatever. So if that's what you think, if this is what you think is better than Saving Private Ryan, you don't know what you're talking about. Also, Jim Carrey in The Truman Show, he deserved an Oscar for that. He actually won the Golden Globe, I believe, too. So and was not even nominated for the Oscars. What the fuck? Like, you know, that's one of those things. So it really is like this whole contest, basically, of trying to schmooze, trying to play in that zeitgeist. Like with The Truman Show, comedy is not, you can't win Best Picture or Best Actor if you're a comedian or whatever. So all that, yes. So a lot of it's just BS there. And I definitely think that, I love the comparison to Jack Morris. Again, someone that's just very, very favorable, you know, maybe played in a big market for an extended number of years, WAR 43, because, you know, this was definitely much more of like, you take advanced metrics, right? I forget, there's a lot of pitchers out there, never made the Hall of Fame, but the WAR is higher because guess what? They got people out, but they played for a crappy team. So, and they didn't play for a big market like the Yankees, your Red Sox, Dodgers, or whoever. So, you know, there was a lot of lost people out there that just never got that chance. So much so that baseball had to have this like historical committee or something like that to be like, y'all screwed up. You guys can't evaluate things because you guys are just a bunch of biased, you know, assholes. So we're gonna actually kind of, you know, set up a committee to undo all your wrongdoings, essentially. That is what the Baseball Hall of Fame is with regards to this. So that's how I feel about the Baseball Hall of Fame. That's how I feel about, you know, judgment of the writers with regards to that.
They're gonna wait till Bonds, Clemens, Sosa, and all them die, and then they'll be like, okay, now we
can do it. Yeah, now we can do it. Now we can do it. It's like, is that how petty can you be then with regards to that? You know.
It was like poor Ron Santo. Like, no, like I think Ron Santo was like one of the first of that historical committee, and I was just like, this dude was like, he had amputated legs. He was like the beloved announcer of the Cubs. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I don't care about Ron Santo, but like, I was like, man, that's pretty cold, man. That's like really cold. This poor guy. That's all he wanted. All he wanted.
It's like what do you gotta like set up a Make-A-Wish for Ron Santo? Like, come on. I just want to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't have any legs. Like, what can you do? Like, yeah, you look at Ron Santo, was able to contribute for the Cubs. Like, yeah, not as like a Cubs fan, but you look at it, what he was able to do, his stats and everything. Put him in the fucking Hall of Fame, but for whatever reason, you know, I'm not too familiar about the whole backgrounds with Ron Santo. If he had any discrepancies with the media, probably it sounds like so. Because I know, like, I know as an adult, I hear him as an announcer. He can be a pretty fun guy, which, you know, the media doesn't tend to like sometimes. So yeah. So that's definitely where I you know, there's always this bias with regards to media and how they treat the players, so much so it's like they're propping them up for you know, for success even before they do anything successful. So that's definitely where I feel like Curt Schilling, you know, he definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. You know, cut all the other stuff out. I get it, whatever. You know, he can definitely have his say on stuff, but you got to evaluate him, the player, as a talent, what they were able to contribute. And all that. I know there's like a morality. Was it a morality or like, you know, clause or part of that within the Baseball Hall of Fame? I know that is part of it, but it's like, I don't know, has he killed anybody? Has he like, you know, done any like anything that a lot of other athletes are doing or have done that are in the Hall of Fame? No, he hasn't. So Yeah, he's definitely said a lot of controversial things. I get it. But at the same time, a lot of people have said a lot of different things in baseball, sports in general. So, but they're still heralded. They're still in Hall of Fame. So like, why make Curt Schilling kind of, I don't know, like a martyr in a way with regards to this? Like, it's just ridiculous. So I'm definitely much more on team Curt Schilling with that. Just looking at the stats, his career, clutch moments, the bloody sock. Holy cow! They'll put his sock in the Hall of Fame or whatever. So, but they won't put Curt Schilling in there. So
Curt will take your sock, but you can't come. You're not invited. We'll have your sock though.
Yeah, we'll do your laundry for you.
Get that man's laundry. Get in there now. Bud Selig, get in there.
Yeah. So, but yeah, with regards to like, I guess steroids and everything too, it's definitely like so many different sides, and I don't know if I necessarily have a strong opinion on it. Right? I feel like in modern sports, like everybody's always trying to find that edge and everything, and like I don't know, was steroids necessarily banned or whatever for that? I guess not necessarily when they were all of a sudden like, oh, everybody's hitting homers. Why is that happening? Oh, steroids? Oh, holy cow. So I get that, as a competitor, they're trying to really push the edge and go out there. Like, if it's not against the rules per se, is it really cheating? But at the same time, there's definitely that whole competitiveness. Like you want some level of an equal playing field, with regards to at least steroids. And, but then, it's like, how does that differentiate from all the pine tar, from spitballs, from all the other fun stuff that players do with baseballs or their bats or cork, right? I know that's the fun part too. It's like how where do we draw the lines with regards to competitive advantages? We've talked about the shift and things like that from the team perspective, but from the individual perspective, then it's like how can we draw the lines on steroid use and PEDs and with pine tar with obviously the Astros kind of going all, recording all that, playing drums, going all Bill Belichick with regards to pitching and all that. But obviously, a lot of teams in the past have stolen signals from pitchers and catchers. So it's like, again, where are we going to draw the line with regards to that? And, how can we punish it, or how do we enforce some sort of like punishment or how do we regulate that from the competitive perspective on baseball? So I think those are my initial thoughts with regards to that. But it's hard to say if that's the way to go, or to completely just like, do we go completely ignore all these competitive advantages? So like, hey, if you win, great, good for you, we'll put you on the hall and all that. Or do we go the other way of just saying that all these things are wrong? So,
yeah. I mean, illegal drugs, things that could harm, youth in their outlook on life, how to become a professional player, how to become a strong man. Like, I think those kinds of things are so detrimental to the game. And even when Bonds was going through it, I mean, he was probably the most egregious. I mean, I know McGwire and Sosa had their era, but it was like he was piggybacking off that. And as we were watching, everyone was like looking left and right, like, this is a fucking joke, right? Because it's like, nobody's buying this. Like, this guy's in his late 30s. He's hitting, 60, 70 home runs. He never did that in his, in his prime years, where he's actually like a stud baseball player. He's like on the same shelf as a Ken Griffey Jr. It was just like, why are you doing this? It's too bad. I mean, it's just like really too bad that Barry felt like he had to go there to, justify himself, vindicate himself. It's kind of like a Kevin Durant situation going to Golden State, in a different way. It's like something goes on between these guys' ears, and it's like, it's just very confusing. But I think to what you're saying about the sign stealing stuff, like that has been a part of the game. This whole thing with tech definitely changed the scenario, because you had like analysts up in the box feeding signals down to the dugout and this and that. One thing I thought about, and nowadays they have, for the catchers, they have like a beeper system that like they'll just beep the sign into the pitcher's ear. He's got a mic and stuff. Like in football's already gone there with the helmets and stuff. But like, instead of just getting all nitpicky about cameras and watches and tablets and all this other stuff, just let everybody use everything all the time with tech. Let everybody do everything they want to like analyze the game, break it down with video, audio, wearables, whatever it is, because I think like this beeper technology, unless they're like, connected to NASA, Houston, I don't know, but like, unless they're like got sonar and can like, I don't know, like kind of play off like when the sounds are going to come over and like what the sounds actually mean or something. But like, I just think, sign stealing, I just think if you let everybody use tech and just like leave that alone, like I think that's good enough. But when it comes to drugs and things to like abnormally make yourself stronger in a competitive sport, like whether it's track and field, football, you name it, I just think that's like a no-go. That's a non-starter, because it hurts the players, their long-term health, and it hurts all of us as like viewers and like especially kids who are just like, I did it myself. I thought Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire were like gods, I thought they were actual gods, and we were just like watching gods like take over the universe. Like 1998 was like seriously one of the most exciting years of baseball that I've ever watched, and I was pretty impressionable as an 11-year-old who loved baseball. So like, that kind of stuff is harmful. And that's probably where I'd go with it on both of those subjects.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely an interesting topic. I think it's like, like, do we let kids take steroids? Is that something that would be acceptable in high school? Or should we just let them, hey, here are the ramifications if you do it? Like, you get a bunch of back acne, and below the waist can be a little bit weird. So, is it like a choice thing? Do we want to just like, hey, if you want to ruin your biological systems and all that, go for it, I guess. But, like I guess drugs and performance enhancing and drugs can definitely be, it's definitely like, I feel like kind of a gray line between that and then obviously all the other types of remedies that professional players, or just professional athletes in general are utilizing. We're talking about all the how there's hyperbolic chambers and all that, all the state-of-the-art types of remedies with massaging or acupuncture. There's so many different things and ways now that athletes are improving their body, getting recovery time. Talking about cupping too, and a lot of Olympic athletes do that. So it's like, do we allow players to then go the extra step and take some sort of foreign substance that needs to be injected into them to do these things? If I have a son or whatever, like I definitely would be like, yeah, don't go that route. That's how I would go. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, if maybe if you are just somebody that, hey, all the ramifications about what these drugs can do to your body, but if you want to go that route, maybe go for it. But I definitely also think that as a society, then it's like we got to evaluate it as, all right, if they're willing to do that, like should we look at them more favorably? Is like how I guess women in Botox or plastic surgery, is it kind of the same thing there versus how working out and dieting and juicing and all that fun stuff. So I don't know. It is kind of, at least I feel like it's a little bit of a gray area, but I can definitely see where it's like you want it to be as pure as possible, just because you love the sport, you want to see the best, but at the same time you don't want things to be too crazy going on forth. So I'm pretty hard on the steroids part, as that being a definite no. Like I love what they've done with that system where it's half a season, 1 season, and like lifetime ban. I think that's a fair way of going about it. Like, hey, we'll slap you on there pretty hard because that's like half your salary for the year. Then we'll get your full one. And then by that point, your stigma, everything that will follow you, like you're pretty much after probably the first one, like a no-go for the Hall of Fame with where guys are currently standing. Like, I hope the writers have some backbone and like will stand behind this for as long as it takes. Like,
because I mean, we didn't even touch on Pete Rose, which is like, you know, another part is like now we're in a world where, you know, gambling, sports gambling is like the rage. Like it's even more popular than like season-long fantasy seasons that, you know, would be gambling among friends for, you know, a pool of money. But now it's like on a daily basis, you can gamble on like basically any sport anytime. So it's like, I'm just saying, I think Pete Rose would be the first guy I let into the door before I look at any of the steroid users. Cause I'm like, this guy did it as a manager and he was betting apparently on his own team. So it's not like he was throwing games. But again, we're getting nitpicky. I think all this stuff's kind of trashy. I think it all kind of follows you in your own history, your own story. You always have an asterisk above your name. And personally within you, like if you, Wayne, or me are playing a sport, but we're knowingly taking steroids or betting on outcomes or whatever, like how good are you actually going to feel at the end of your career? Like, yeah, you made a lot of money and like you got a lot of press or whatever. Like personally, I don't care about it that much. Like, I don't really care if like I got a huge following or something. Like that just like doesn't matter as much, I think, in like my own life. But like, it's very sad, honestly, that it needs to go there for guys like a Barry Bonds, who's already was a first ballot Hall of Famer, regardless of all this crap, like needed to go there, you know?
Yeah. No, I like that, your analogy though, of like, it is kind of like Kevin Durant joining the Warriors, right? It's like, you know, you're very much heralded, like you're on your way to a Hall of Fame career, and then you just I don't know, got lazy or whatever. You just like you kind of took the easy way out, the easy road, and you know, I think it's one of those like I guess double-edged swords. Like we want players to perform, right? We want them to perform their best, or perform out of this world, and maybe, you know, as an athlete, it's like they have just higher expectations for themselves too. So that's where it's like, oh, I'm Kevin Durant. I want to win a championship. I don't want to be Charles Barkley. You know, I don't want to be John Stockton or Karl Malone. I want to win a chip. So, you know, that's definitely where it's like where we would knock him for that. And he just, I guess, didn't feel that way, that he can get that championship in for Oklahoma City. Although it's like, man, if they just kept Russell Westbrook and James Harden there, just wait a couple years for that salary cap to go up a little bit. I definitely like that analogy. I think it makes a great point of like, yeah, is there, you know, you're killing the competitiveness of the game if you're Kevin Durant, you just join, like, you know, or any of these athletes, right, in the NBA, just joining whatever superstar team out there and just creating super teams. It's like super teams in the NBA is kind of like, yeah, I guess, I don't know, steroid use and all that for MLB and all. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we can close the book on this topic. I think that, no, it touches on so many different aspects of players and their decisions over the time, and just kind of like the criteria with which we, you know, judge performance and judge, you know, individuals. So,